April 16th. Richard Baxter. Affliction can prepare ordinary men for extraordinary tasks. His whole life, Richard Baxter suffered from chronic illness that left him weak and uncertain if he would breathe another breath. But when he was 23, he so badly wanted to help people know Jesus that he decided to go into ministry. He said, "Expecting to be so quickly in another world, the great concernments of miserable souls did prevail with me against all these impediments." Baxter believed that if God used him to win 1 or 2 souls to Christ, it would be worth all his suffering. He wanted to minister to an area where people had not already heard the gospel, and this led him to the people of Kidderminster, a town of 800 families made up of crude handloom workers. The place was infamous for its ignorance and depravity. After Baxter preached his first sermon, with scarcely one family from each street in attendance, he was unanimously elected minister. He spoke on the importance of church discipline and taking the Lord's Supper. Though he had little education, he was a compelling speaker. His immense knowledge was evident. He could readily quote from any of the hundreds of books that lined his shelves. Baxter went from house to house. The families he visited seriously thought about the things Baxter shared, and many of them cried. Baxter said, "Some ignorant persons who have been so long unprofitable hearers have gotten more knowledge and remorse of conscience in half an hour's close disclosure than they did from 10 years public preaching." He would leave a chosen book or 2 from his library for each family to read. Soon, great crowds flocked to hear Baxter, even though his sermons were an hour long and he read straight from a manuscript. The building held 1,000 people, and soon it was full. In fact, the crowds grew so much that 5 galleries had to be built to accommodate all of the people. On any given day, hundreds of families were singing psalms or repeating Sunday sermons in their homes. Concerning the rapid growth, Baxter said, "When I first entered on my labors, I took special notice of everyone that was humbled, reformed, or converted. When I had labored long, it pleased God that the converts were so many. Families in considerable numbers at once came in and grew up. I scarce knew how." Baxter resonated with the words of Jacob in Genesis chapter 41, verse 52, which says, "Jacob named the second Ephraim, for, he said, God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction." Baxter continued to have pain, but instead of growing bitter, he saw his pains as blessings God used to mold him for greater ministry. He said, "I humbly bless his gracious providence, who gave me his treasure in an earthen vessel and trained me up in the school of affliction." This, he said, allowed him to preach with compassion, as a dying man to dying men. How are you allowing God to use the tool of affliction in your life to prepare you for the extraordinary tasks that lie ahead? Affliction can prepare ordinary men for extraordinary tasks.
Hey man, this is Eric Bloom, one of the pastors at Landing Place Church in Commerce City, Colorado. Richard Baxter, a life from this video that we could see that was characterized by chronic pain and God moving in his life in the midst of chronic pain. The video uses the word affliction, and another way to describe an affliction is truthfully a limitation. Richard Baxter had health limitations, and as men, we also have limitations. Single men have different limitations than married men as far as time goes. And married men without any children have different limitations than men married with children. This can go all the way to our season of life, our own health, whatever those things might be, but we all have limitations. And sometimes depending on our limitations, whether they're like mental limitations, God might just want us to break through those things, like break through the limitations of fear into a place of courage. And in other areas of our life, and he wants us to embrace those limitations, that he wants to meet us in the midst of those limitations so that we can rely on him and follow him in the midst of those things. So, man, I just want to encourage you today and challenge you to think of what is a limitation in your own life, and how is God wanting you to respond to it, to embrace it or to break through in some way.